All right, good evening, everyone. And this Shabbos, we have actually a double Parsha. It's Parshas Acharei-Kedoshim. Parshas Acharei-Kedoshim, in combination, is a huge amount of mitzvahs are listed in those two Parshas. Over 70 commandments out of the 613 commandments are only listed in Parshas Kedoshim. One little Parsha. There's many, many mitzvahs. Parshas Acharei, some of you will remember because we read it on Yom Kippur. This is the majority of the reading is the service of the high priest in the Holy of Holiest on Yom Kippur with all the structure of the day of Yom Kippur. The other part of the Parsha is the laws of different forms of adultery and the prohibition of incest and the different forms of incest. However, Parshas Kedoshim, the second Parsha, is a Parsha that actually the king was reading it in the Hakil. Every 7 years there was a Shemitah year, sabbatical year, and at the end of a sabbatical year, all the Jewish people would get together to Yerushalayim, to the temple, and the king would go up on a high podium on the end of the holiday of Sukkot, the first night of Sukkot, and he would read portions of the Torah. And among the portion of the Torah that the king was reading Parshas Kedoshim. This year, we all know that this year is the year of Hakil. Last year was a year of Shemitah. It was a year of a sabbatical in Israel. And the year after the sabbatical year, the first year after Shemitah, is called the year of Hakil. So this week's Parsha is directly connected to the time of the year that we are standing in. And it's a very special Parsha. Many, many laws and commandments that the title of the Parsha just tells you already how special it is because it's called Parshas Kedoshim. Kedoshim means holy ones. And the Parsha opens up with the words, Kedoshim tiyu ki kodesh ani Hashem Elokechem. Be holy because I am your God is holy. And God Almighty wants from us to be holy people. We all know that the Kohen, is the holy man. The one who we read in Parshas Acharei, the one who goes into the Holy of Holiest and performs the service, is very holy man. His family members are called Kohanim, also holy people. Yeah, we have here two Kohanim in the room. We have Paula is a daughter of a Kohen, and Michael is a Kohen. We have Kohanim here, and Kohanim are holy people. And holy people have a set of rules how they're supposed to behave and how they're supposed to conduct themselves, because the word holy, kadosh, in Hebrew means distinguished, superior. And to be distinguished means you have a special diet you have to eat, you have special clothing you have to wear, you have special limitations and rules of laws that are obligated just for someone who has the title kadosh, the title holy. And God Almighty comes to the Jewish people in this book of Torah Kohanim. This was the introduction we said when we started teaching this book, the book of Leviticus. Every Jew is a Levitic. Every Jew is a Kohen. If he's not from the Kohanim, he's called, God Almighty called us a Mamlechet Kohanim, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. This is what he called us when he gave us the Torah on Mount Sinai. And therefore, this week's Parsha, God Almighty wants each and every one of us to stand up and reach that level of being kadosh, being holy. What does it mean to be holy? Now, you could imagine being holy could mean maybe we should have a set of wings and fly in the midnight and sit in the celestial angelic spheres and meditate for hours and hours on the tip of a mountain, surrounded with flames and beautiful roses and flowers, and have some form of a ceremony because we are holy people. It's very interesting to follow this week's Parsha and to see what does it mean to be holy. The topic of tonight's class is actually a very human topic because we're going to talk tonight about administrating criticism. One of the mitzvahs of being a holy people, God Almighty commands us to administrate criticism to one another. Reprove, you shall reprove your kinmen we have an obligation to criticize one another. That is a very, very sticky subject, very painful to be a recipient of criticism, and it's a very difficult thing to give criticism. Who wants to criticize and who wants to get criticized? But apparently part of being a holy people is to learn how to criticize one another. And tonight, I want to open up this topic of criticism and really open up a gate here to understand one of the most magnificent teachings in Judaism. How are we supposed to tell off another person and awaken another person to improve his behaviors, to do better? There is very special teachings here that I have collected from different teachings, primarily compiled from multiple sources in the Talmud, Maimonides, some of it is Medrash, just a beautiful compilation of teachings. And my brother, the Rabbi in Bellevue, Washington, Rabbi Mordechai Farkash, has written up a beautiful summary on the subject. And his paper I'm going to be sharing tonight in tonight's class, because a lot of those teachings was stuff that we worked through together, as we have many conversations on different topics throughout the years. And he has put in some wonderful chidushim of himself that I will be sharing with all of you. I want you just for 1 second, I want to digress to the opening of this week's Parshah, the first mitzvah that God Almighty tells us to be holy. Be holy because I am holy. What's the first statement after that? Revere your father and mother. Ish imai ve'aviv tilo. The first commandment in being a holy person is reverence, respect towards father and mother. And the next thing, in the same breath, it says, and guard my Shabbos. Two commandments that seemingly have no connection, besides both of them being in the 10 commandments. But in the 10 commandments, we have honor thy father and mother. Here it says, revere your mother and father. I just want to touch on it for a second. First of all, there's a beautiful, Rashi explains it's interesting, the difference, because in honoring, it says, honor thy father, and then it says thy mother. Reverence, it says, revere your mother, and then it says, revere your father. Why a difference like this? And Rashi gives us a beautiful psychological explanation. He says, naturally, a child reveres his father and respects his mother. Father usually is the image who brings in a little bit more awe, more respect demanding. A mother is more loving, more appeasing, more doing nice to the child. So when it comes to honoring, we have to tell you first, honor thy father. Because naturally a kid likes to honor his mother. She's always nice to him. She always takes care of him. She always makes sure his lunchbox is done. He has what he needs. I mean, not all mothers are the same, but just a generalization. However, when it comes to reverence, naturally a child is not so afraid of his mother. The fear is more towards the mother. This is why the Torah tells us first, fear your mother, revere your mother, then revere your father. First of all, stating that one person that needs to be more emphasized. That's just a beautiful Rashi. But what I'm paying attention to in this is this idea of, if you want to be a holy person, you have to revere your parents. That's the first thing. What does it have to do with revering your parents as being a holy person? This is actually going to lead us into the discussion of criticism. What is the job of parents? Some of us were parents. Some of us are still parents. What is the job of a parent in a child's life? Among the many, many jobs of a parent in a child's life, The parent is more of an image. At a certain point of our life, when we stop being the ones nurturing our children, making sure they have what they need, their food, their clothes, their shelter, their safety, there is point of maturity where father becomes more of an image. In English, they call it a father image. When we move from being the one who gives the money to the child or gives him his education, we become a character in the child's life where the child will always look up to, what would my father say regarding what I'm going to do right now? How would my father appreciate or not appreciate my move that I just did, the girl I'm just dating, the choices I'm just making? It's a certain moment where we shift from being children of our parents as recipient of our needs to be filled, and we move to that place where our parents become images who we look up to, and we say, I wish my father would see me right now graduating in honors. I would make him really proud. And that suddenly shifts from being an image in your life, an image of a person that you have deep respect towards, and looking for approval, looking for validation, looking for understanding. If the father is alive, how much more so even when he's not alive? There's always that father image that is supposed to exist. And those people who had a shadowed relationship with their father and mother, there's many in our generation who suffered this generation gap. What we existed in starting in the 50s and in the 60s became even stronger in the 70s, where parents and children had no relationship. There was no commonality. Parents felt they can't talk to their kids, and kids felt that they are not understood by their parents. In the West, this idea of a father image was a little bit lost. And we see children roaming around looking for a father image, looking for a mother image, looking for someone they can look towards for validation, for understanding. And this is where mentorship comes into place. This is where a person, the Torah tells us, Aseh lechorav, make yourself a mentor, make yourself a teacher, make yourself someone, even if you don't have it naturally because your dad wasn't that type of a person, or you had no relationship with your father in that way. A human being has to have character in his life that he checks in, that he has reverence towards. And this is where men of the clergy are supposed to live in a certain lifestyle to bring that high esteem. This is where people find teachers, mentors, sometimes even a therapist, someone you can look up to and check in with. Because without a father image, it's not just you being a loose cannon and you're doing whatever you want. Without a father image, a person lacks that protection. There's a certain protection, there's a certain element of I'm checking in. I am checking in with someone that I have reverence towards. Very, very important. And there is so much more to talk about the subject. I just want to bring out this point before we're going to talk about rebuke and criticism, that the first mention of the Torah of being a holy person is having the reverence of adults in your life. Safe adults that you look up to, and you check in with them, knowing, is my behavior suitable to who I am as a person? And myself, being today a father to 6 children, Baruch Hashem, and being the son of my father who was just now here in Seattle for Pesach, I found myself looking towards my father for approval. Thank God in a healthy way. Looking towards my dad and watching What do you think about how I conducted the Seder today? And hearing from him his fatherly compliments as well as his fatherly disapproval of certain behaviors that maybe I can do better in. And now, as a 42-year-old man who is myself a father to children, respecting and appreciating that I have an elder in my life that I can look up and check in with and have the type of relationship. Really wishing and hoping that my own children will see in me that father image that demands a lot of vulnerability on my side. It demands a lot of self-work, being a good person myself, being someone who honors those kids, giving Menachem and Liba and all those wonderful children that I'm blessed with, giving them the feeling and understanding is, I have your back. Check in before you're doing something. I don't want that if my child gets in trouble in the middle of the night, he says, I hope my father never finds out about it. I want my child should say, if he gets into trouble, the only person I can call is my father. That feeling of safety, the feeling of like protection, the feeling of like, I am the safest person in my child's life. To be a holy person, to be a person that Kedusha, holiness, is actually a factor that is not just another quality that you carry, but that's actually your being. Torah tells us the first thing is you need to have father and mother reverence. You have to have an higher being in your life, a physical human being in your life you look up to with reverence. Very important. And right here, we're going to go straight into the topic of tonight's class. This is what I wanted to, with this understanding, now we could go into the topic of criticism with the right mindset. So I'm going to turn to the verse that the Torah tells us about the importance of criticizing one another. The Torah says as follows. This is chapter 19, verse 17. I want to quote the verse because every word in that verse teaches us tremendous insight about how to do criticism in a healthy way. Do not hate your brother in your heart. It's the beginning of the verse. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Reprove, you shall reprove your kinmen. Do not bring upon him sin. Okay, so the Torah begins first of all with a commandment. There's a prohibition. You're not allowed to hate fellow Jew in your heart. Yeah, it's one commandment. Don't hold hatred in your heart towards a fellow brother. Then the Torah says we have an obligation to rebuke, reprove, criticize our kinmen. But there is a clause. There's a clause over here. Lo yisisa olav chet. Do not cause him to sin. And then I want to tell you the next verse after that. Lo tikom. There's a prohibition of being vengeful. Velo yisitor. Another prohibition here. You're not allowed to bear a grudge in your heart towards people of your nation. And the Torah concludes, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ani Hashem. Love your fellow Jew as you love yourself. I am God, your God. So within this verse, it begins with do not hate your brother in your heart. Then it says, criticize, you shall criticize. It uses the term twice. Criticize, you shall criticize your kinsman. Don't cause him to sin. Don't be vengeful. Don't bear a grudge against the members of your nation. Love your fellow Jew as you love yourself. I am God, your God. That's the verse. Now, the reason why we are studying tonight this topic is obviously because in the moment you hear the words "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your fellow Jew as you love yourself. By the way, we remember Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, his students, 24,000 students died during this time of the year, between Pesach and Lag BaOmer. They all died, and the Talmud tells us there was this horrible plague. They all died. Some say it was in the wars of Bar Kokhba. Why did they all die? Says the Talmud, they had no respect towards each other. So you could imagine 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva. We don't even know their names. We have no teachings quoted in their names. We have an entire Talmud, and out of the 24,000 students, nothing is left. Even their name we don't know. But after, when Rabbi Akiva began to reestablish his yeshiva, he had a handful of students. And that handful of students, they are the masters and they are the source of the Talmud that we have today. All their names are quoted and remembered. And that is because they committed to have respect to one another. They knew that their earlier generation all died as a result of no respect, and they committed themselves to fulfill Rabbi Akiva's wish of "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," to love your fellow as you love yourself. Let's go straight to the topic of rebuke, and let's be practical today, okay? I want to be practical with you. We could talk esoterics, we could be metaphoric. I want to be practical tonight. The Gemara says in the Talmud, in the Tractate of Erchin, the Talmud says, I wonder if there is a person in our generation who accepts criticism. Now, this is the Talmud. This is over 2,000 years ago. In the Talmud, 1,700 years ago. In the Talmud wonders. I wonder, says Rav Tarfon, student of Rabbi Akiva, I wonder if there is a person in our generation who even accepts criticism. Now, there's a mitzvah in the Torah to criticize one another. And in that generation of the Talmud, there's already a difficulty with accepting criticism. King Solomon, in the book of Proverbs, says, don't rebuke a scoffer because he's going to hate you. Rebuke a wise man because he's going to love you. Obviously, we see already that mitzvah of rebuking and criticizing another person, it's very difficult to be the one giving criticism. And if it's more difficult to be the one who has to be the recipient of that criticism. And the Medrash tells us, love without criticism is not considered love. And it brings a verse to support that. And it says, Hashem, anyone that God loves, Yoichiach, Hashem criticizes. Criticism brings to peace. Criticism brings to love. Love without criticism is not considered love, according to the Talmud. This is what the Medrash tells us. Now, we need to really delve in and understanding what exactly is the proper way of criticizing. What are we talking about when we say criticism? Now, there are two forms of criticism. The one form of criticism is, I want to be practical tonight. There's one form of criticism is, you see a person not going in the right direction. He's doing things that are not okay. They're not kosher. There is a mitzvah, you have a mitzvah as a fellow Jew to remind and awaken and criticize the other Jew and remind him that he has to go in the right path. That's one thing, it's one mitzvah. Another mitzvah is when someone does something wrong to you, someone hurt your feelings. You have a mitzvah to go to that person and tell him, you hurt me. I'm willing to forgive you as long as you say, I'm sorry. That criticism, again, this is bin Adam L'Malkaim, there is criticism between you when someone does something between him and God, that we have to criticize a fellow Jew and cause him to come back to the path of being a better Jew, following Hashem's mitzvahs, learning Hashem's Torah. We have to criticize a fellow person and wake him up. Another thing is, when someone hurts you, someone does bad things against you, you just don't sit quiet and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to take it. I'm just going to let myself suffer. I'm going to let myself struggle. There's a mitzvah, and Maimonides says, you have a mitzvah to go over to the person and tell him, you have wronged me. You have hurt me. You have done something bad to me. And make him aware of what he did. And tell him that you are willing to forgive him in case he's going to apologize. You don't have to forgive him. But if you want to forgive, tell him, I'm willing to forgive you as long as you are not recognizing what you did wrong and you apologize. Now, when you look at the verse, who tells us the mitzvah of criticizing, and you analyze how to do it in the right way, it's wonderful to be able to look into the laws on criticism. There's halachas how this should be done. And I really feel that this set of laws that were written thousands of years ago are really touching the core of human psychology, of how to make a society where people are supporting each other in their growth, in their becoming a better person. And not every person is just locked into his own ways, his own behaviors. We could translate it in marriage and relationship, husband and wife, or parents and children, and even just as friends, just people together as a society who is interacting with each other. The Torah already lays out the grounds of here, so a beautiful, clear pathway. And I want to touch on 7 points how criticism can be done in a way that it not only doesn't hurt another person's feelings and diminish him, it actually ends up becoming a tremendous catalyst for growth, for expansion, for becoming a better person. Number one, the number one thing is the right place. What does it mean, the right place? The right place means criticism should only be done in a place where it's secluded. You and the one person that you're talking to. There's no public records. There's no other people around. It's a private audience between you and the person you are going to criticize or you're going to reprove. This is based on a teaching in the Talmud regarding the king Yeravam. Yeravam was the king who split away from the kingdom of the house of David. Says the Talmud, why did Yeravam merit to become king? And why did he lose his kingship? Says the Talmud, the reason why he merited to become king is because he criticized King Solomon. And why did he lose his kingship? Is because he did it in public. So in one hand, you have the mitzvah, the tremendous good deed that he did, that he used his voice and he called out the injustice towards King Solomon for opening up for closing down the ways and the pathways to Jerusalem, something that his father David opened up. King Solomon closed it up in order to keep a space for the daughter of Pharaoh. He criticized them. And that was a beautiful thing that he did. He woke up King Solomon to the tshuva to become a better person. But what is the sin? The sin was that he did it in public. So number one, when we're going to think about, I'm going to talk to someone about something that he wronged me, premeditate which location you're going to do that. And I remember once when I needed to do it to one of my kids, and I didn't know how to approach him because it was a very, very sensitive subject. And I called one of my mentors to say, how do I administrate criticism to this young man? And he said, don't do it in the house. Put him in, go into the car and go on a car ride with him. And when you are in the privacy of the car and you don't have eye contact with him, you don't looking him in the eyes, and you're not locking him in, you're just driving on the road, buy an ice cream or soda on the way. And while you're driving, use the opportunity where he is facing the road and you are facing the road, and it's more of a relaxed space. Use that opportunity to talk to him about whatever you need to talk to him. The location, the space, the privacy, tremendous amount of human dignity taken in consideration when it's not done in public. That's number one. Number two is emphasized in the words, reprove, you shall reprove your kinsman. And then it says, Velo siso olev chet. Don't raise upon him sin. The word siso means raising. So the translation in English means don't cause him sin, but really the word is don't raise upon him sin. What does it mean? And here comes the second point regarding criticism. And that is, don't amplify what he did. When you're going to talk to him about something that he did wrong, stay to the point. Don't begin to go on and on and on and explaining and describing. What is going to happen as a result of amplifying, talking excessively about what a person did, the automatic reaction would be resentment. Now I'm going to do it just because. So when you administrate the criticism, stay brief. Stay on course. Don't go on and on. Just say, that's what I want to talk to you about. And that's it. Don't raise that sin. Don't make it more than it was. Don't amplify it, because what's going to happen is it's going to cause him to eventually reject, rebel, walk away, as we all experienced ourselves with people in our life, adults who try to make us better people, but they used to give us long lectures. And we used to like roll our eyes. Here comes the lecture. And it would go on and on and on. And within 2 minutes of that lecture, we would be feeling already imprisoned, want to break away. And now we're going to do it just because. So the idea is, and this is the second point, is stay brief. Stay to the point. You said what you had to say. Say goodbye. It's done. You said what you had to. And here we're coming to point number 3. The Talmud says, and this is a interesting teaching about Friday afternoon, that a person on Friday afternoon in his house has to ask his family, did they do the tithing of the fruits? Did they do the Eruv? Did they light the candle? The job of the man in the house to make sure that everything is prepared for Shabbos. These days is, did you turn down the light in the refrigerator? Did we put up the hot water kettle? Is the crock pot on 275? All those questions that you ask in the house to make sure, is the lights in the bedroom off? Did we leave the light in the bathrooms on? You have to go around the house, and right before Shabbos comes in, there is a whole checklist that you have to check in with the family if things were done. Says the Talmud, when the husband does it in the house, the man of the house walks around and he's checking in with the family if they did all of that. Says the Talmud, you should do it with a soft voice. And Rashi says, why do you have to use a soft voice? Because the one day should listen to you. If you're going to speak harshly and loudly, the family is going to reject your questions. Says the Talmud, before the mitzvah of rebuking and reproving and criticizing one another, the Torah tells us, Loi sisna es achicha b'lavech. Don't have any hatred in your heart. Before you're going to talk to someone, before you're going to criticize someone, make sure that your heart is clean. Because when someone does bad things to you, or let's say is religious zealousy, we have a lot of negativity in our heart already towards that person. If you're going to show up with that negativity, the only thing you're going to get is rejection. A person, a human being, senses right away who likes me and who doesn't like me. So it's not just about what you're going to say, where you're going to say it, how you're going to say it. It's about coming with the intention. I'm here to speak from a soft place in my heart. So this is why the Torah gives us as an introduction to the mitzvah of criticizing. What does the Torah say? Don't have any hatred in your heart. Make sure that when you're showing up to criticize, you are refined, you care. It comes from a place of caring for the well-being of another person. It doesn't come from a place of zealousy, or from a place of jealousy, or from a place of hatred. It has to come from a pure place of caring. What does the Torah use the term? Your kinsman. It has to be a person that you already have with a relationship. So the introduction to the criticism has to be a form of a connection. I'm criticizing you for deepening our connection. I'm not criticizing you for the sake of criticism, because I'm upset and I hate you and I'm angry at you. I'm criticizing you because you're a kinsman. You're a person who is like me. You're a person on my level. And I want all of us should do better. And you can do better. I'm talking to you from that space. I care about you. I love you. Now, another important thing here, and that is, before you criticize someone else, criticize yourself. The Torah uses a very interesting terminology. Hocheach, tוכיח. Criticize, you shall criticize. Interesting double language here. What is this double language? Criticize, you shall criticize. The same thing also we have regarding circumcision. The Torah says, Himoil, Yimoil. Circumcise, you shall circumcise each one of your children. The Talmud says, what does it mean, circumcise, you should circumcise? Is it double circumcision? So does the Talmud know? What does it mean, circumcise, you shall circumcise? Only a person who himself is Jewish and circumcised, he can circumcise another Jew. In other words, just because your pediatrician knows how to do circumcision, doesn't mean that he can do the mitzvah of circumcision. The himoil yimoil, the one who is obligated to circumcision, he is the one who can and should be the one to circumcise a Jewish child. This is why a Jewish woman who is a pediatrician cannot do a bris, even though she's Jewish and she's observant, cannot do the bris on a Jewish child, not because she doesn't qualify, not because she's a bad person, not because she's a woman. It's because she has no obligation of the mitzvah of bris. Only the one who has an obligation to do the bris can do the bris to someone else. The very same thing is here also in criticize, you should criticize. If you are going to criticize someone else, before you do that, take a moment and do some criticism on yourself. Yeah? When a person criticizes himself, meaning to say, you clean yourself, you purify yourself, you make sure your heart is clean, you make sure you're checking in with yourself. How am I doing in that behavior that I'm going to ask my child to become a better person? How am I doing in that? I'm going to tell my child not to spend time on his phone for so many hours. Am I not spending time on the phone for so many hours? I'm going to tell my child not to watch a certain type of movie. Am I not watching that type of a movie? The idea is that before you criticize someone else, before you're going to do tוכיח, you have to do הוכח. You have to take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, how am I doing in that? When you do that, we know that that's going to come from a place of compassion. We know that the criticism will come from a place of love because you checked in with yourself first. Obviously, we all get triggered by people's behavior that remind us about our own. Called in English, it's called projecting. Projecting. You yourself are doing bad things. So when someone does a bad thing next to you, you become all judgmental. It's called projecting. In order not to project, in order to actually criticize in a way of causing someone to become a better person, first thing is check in with yourself. How am I doing on that? What do I need to improve in that topic that I'm going now to criticize someone else? There is a famous Hasidic icon. His name was Reb Zusha from Anipoili. Many beautiful stories about Reb Zusha. He was from the same generation of the Alter Rebbe from Reb Shneir Zalman. Was actually a friend of his. Both of them were students of the great Reb Dov Ber of Mizrich. And the stories goes that when he used to travel from town to town in those days in Ukraine and in Russia and in Poland, and he used to go around and arouse people for repentance, for teshuvah. And the story goes, when he used to come to someone's house, he used to stand at the corner and used to do his personal confession. And the guy was listening. And Reb Zusha would confess on himself and say, Reb Zusha, how come you're doing this? How come you're not careful in washing your hands before food? And he used to talk to himself. And the person used to listen in and see how Reb Zusha is crying on his own behavior, and that would cause him to do and improve his behavior as well. First check in with yourself, and then hocheach, and then tochiach. Like in the bris, first himoil, then yemoil, then you could do the bris for someone else. Another point number 5. Compliment before you criticize. Compliment, lift the person up before you criticize. King Solomon says, as we just mentioned in the book of Proverbs, don't rebuke a scoffer, he's going to hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he's going to love you. What is he telling us here? So the commentary says, when you reprove someone, don't call him a scoffer. He's going to hate you. Call him a wise man, and he's going to love you. When you're going to criticize someone, and you are not complimenting the person beforehand, naturally a human being shuts down to criticism. I don't want to hear anything from you. But when you are coming to him and you make him feel like he's a kinsman, he's a person on your level, he's a mensch, he's a human being, and as a fellow human being, it just doesn't suit you to be that way. It doesn't suit you. That causes a person to want to listen and improve. But when the person is being viewed as a scoffer, as a lowlife, the way you speak to him, there is no moment before where the person feels like a kinsman, like a fellow guy, like a fellow human being. Before you criticize, make sure you lift them up to a place where the person feels that he's a fellow mensch, he's a human being, he's equal to you. The idea of complimenting and lifting up a person before you actually criticize. And it reminds me of a beautiful story, just came to me. A story with the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, where a student of his who was a rabbi in the United States. His name was Rabbi Yochanan Gordon. Rabbi Yochanan Gordon was a rabbi in New Jersey in a shul. And he came to the Rebbe, who arrived to America, and he told the Rebbe that I can't talk to my community. Every time I speak to him, this is an American businessman. I'm a Russian immigrant. Every time I speak to them about being better Jewish and following the mitzvahs, they all eye roll. They all don't care. How do I get them to become better people? How do I criticize them in a way that I actually can see results? And the previous Rebbe gave him a beautiful metaphor. He says, did you ever go to a sauna? In Yiddish, it's called a schwitzbad. Did you ever go to a schwitz, to the sauna? He says, in a sauna, there are steps, there are levels. When a person walks into the sauna, he's still beginning to warm up, and he sits on the lower level. Now, in the sauna, I guess in those days, maybe these days too, I have never went to a sauna, so I don't know how it is, but from the story, I understand that in the sauna in those days, there was a guy who was holding a bundle with willows in his hands. And people would go and pay the guy money to use those willows and whip their back. And this is part of the eucalyptus or the willows. This is something that you do in the sauna to whip the back. So there are certain toxins that go out of the body as a result of that. He says, as the sauna gets hotter and hotter, people will ask the guy with the branches and the willows to hit them harder and harder. Not enough. Give me more. Twice me better. That's how it is. Says the Rebbe to the Rabbi, to Rabbi Yochanan, he says, Rabbi Yochanan, your job is to warm up the shul. Your job is to warm up the sauna. You have to create such a warmth in your synagogue that the members of your synagogue will say, Rabbi, criticize us. Make us better people. So you have to create such a warmth and so many compliments and wonderful dialogue between you and your members of your community that they will ask you to weep them. They will ask you to reprove them, to criticize. They will come to you and say, how come you're not demanding from us more? Your job is not to beat them. Your job is to hit up that shul, to make it such a warm place that people will actually feel the need to come there and ask for more. This is that lesson here. Lesson number 5. This is, you gotta compliment and warm up the person before you are going to criticize. Point number 6, timing. Ooh, this is an important one. Timing. Ethics of Our Fathers tell us a couple of important instructions. This is a very important book, especially now in the summer months. We learn every Shabbos a chapter in Ethics of Our Fathers, Pirkei Avot. In Ethics of Our Fathers, it says, Al toichach odom b'shas chetri. Don't rebuke a person at a time of sin. I'm just going to describe you a scenario. You pass by your child's bedroom, and you hear behind the door, you hear something is going on there. Something unkosher is happening in his bedroom. The natural reaction of a parent is, open up the door and say, what's going on over here? Comes the Talmud and says, don't do this. Don't show up and rebuke a person while he's busy doing already the act of sin. Restrain yourself. But he's doing an act of sin. He's doing something horrible. What's your goal here? Your goal is to just show him that you know what he's doing? Or the goal is you want to raise him that he will never do this again? What's your goal here? Your goal is to make sure that this person becomes a better person. Hold your criticism. Bite your lips. Wait for a time where you can do all the other details that are necessary. You compliment, you have no hatred in your heart. All of those things we learned today, the proper space, all of that. It has to do with timing. Where do we learn timing from? Yaakov, Moshe, and Yoshua. The 3 people who are rebuking their children and really speaking strong words of criticism to their kids, When are they doing that? When is Moshe criticizing the Jewish people? When is Yaakov criticizing his children? On his deathbed. On his deathbed. He's their Rabbi, he's their father, he's their leader for years and years and years. No criticism. When does he criticize them? He criticizes them when he's laying on his deathbed. Why deathbed? Why now? You're watching your children grow all these years. Why are you waiting for now to criticize your kids? Says the Talmud, this was methodical. This was thought out. This is people who teach us how to be leaders, how to be fathers, how to be people who change the world. Number one, Yaakov was worried that if he's going to criticize his child, the shame that criticism causes a kid is that he's going to say, if my father criticizes me, I'll go to my uncle. They had a very, very rich uncle called Esav. And if my father criticizes me, my father doesn't approve of my behavior, is giving me a hard time. Yaakov was always aware that there was an uncle around the corner that his kids can check out and go to that uncle's house. And therefore, Yaakov holds his criticism till his deathbed, because he knows there's a Esav waiting around the corner. If your child feels rejected by you, even in the slightest, he's always going to go to where you don't want him to go. Hold it up. Another thing, says the Talmud, once you criticize someone, every time he sees you, you remind him of that shame. My father caught me in bad behavior. Yaakov knows that after he dies, his children are not going to have to look at him anymore. At the deathbed, he knows that's it. I could criticize him. I could speak again. I could tell them exactly what I'm thinking. We're not going to have to meet again. Again, the timing of not having to see again the child that you criticize, have to see him every time we're going to see each other. There is the memory. My father caught me in the bad behavior. The whole criticism is not there for watching the child growing as a better person. The criticism was there for the improvement of the child. Waiting till that point is, I don't have to see you again. I could tell you what I feel about you, and I could do it from that place of love. And I'm not going to have to meet again and again visit that shame that my criticism causes you. Another reason why he does that timing before his death, the Talmud says Moshe Rabbeinu did it after he finishes fighting 2 great battles for the Jewish people. The idea is choosing that timing after he did a tremendous favor to the Jewish people. First of all, for 40 years he's their leader in the desert. But right there at that moment, the Torah says in the beginning of Chumash Devarim, beginning of the book of Deuteronomy, Acharei-Kedoshim, he finishes killing the king Sichon and Og, the giant. He finished showing the Jewish people how devoted he's towards them. This is when he goes and he rebukes them. He chooses the timing once he showed how much he cares about their well-being. He puts his life on the line for their survival. Now he feels now it's a time when I could talk to them from my heart and tell them about they have to become a little bit better. And here we're coming to the 7th and to the most important one. And that is, while you criticize, find the silver lining in the behavior that you are criticizing the person about. Find a merit in what the child did. You also learn that from Moshe, in the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy, when he criticizes the Jewish people about the way they were struggling with him by the ocean, and the way they were fighting with him by the manna, and the way they were fighting against the spies, all of that. Moshe Rabbeinu uses those locations. But what he does, first of all, he speaks in hints. And that's what one of our teachings today was, the idea of not going on and on about it, just talking to the point. And Moshe Rabbeinu even conceals the criticism by hinting about what they have to repent and what they have to get better in. But more than anything else, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he does that, he actually explains the Jewish people how what they did was not even their fault. When he talks to them about the golden calf, he uses the term v'di zahav. He doesn't even say the golden calf. You say v'di zahav. Di zahav means too much gold. Too much gold. Basically saying, I know why you did the golden calf. You had so much gold. You had nothing better to do with it. So you did a golden calf. When he talks about the manna, that he complained about the manna, what does he say? Teufel v'lovan. Teufel v'lovan means tasteless and white. Again, understanding why were you complaining? The manna had no taste, had no particular taste. It had no color to it. Not like a piece of food that has like a color and a shape and a texture. Obviously, after eating it for a couple of days, it becomes annoying. It becomes, I don't want it anymore. I want to have my steak. I want to have my fish. I want to have a piece of food that has color and shape and character. And it's hot, it's cold. The manna was the same every day. So again, in the criticism, Moshe Rabbeinu puts in so much compassion, not excusing their bad behavior, but actually finding the silver lining, what's really not their fault, that they did what they did. This is another gift of a person to be able to criticize someone in a way that you always find how much the person was actually a good person. He didn't really mean to do anything bad. He maybe stumbled upon it. Maybe he had too much gold and he forgot. Always finding the zchus, the kindness, the grace beneath whatever bad behavior you want him to improve. Now, when you do it in such a way, you bet a person wants to be a better person. As it says, if you don't hate the person in your heart and you rebuke him and you don't not vengeance, you're not bearing a grudge, what's going to be the outcome? The person will love you as you love yourself. Only love will come out from such form, such a planned out form of criticizing another person. This is not just esoteric teaching. This is practical. We all have people in our life that we need to set straight. We are responsible for one another. We are a holy nation, and what makes us holy is this, that we are checking in with each other. We are supposed to look at each other and say, Barry, get better. Do better. You can. And we're supposed to do this to each other. We can't just, each and every one of us, be closed up in their own little cocoon and say, okay, as long as I'm okay, the world is fine. No. We need to raise each other. We need to demand from each other to be better people. And whatever we learn today is very, very practical. I want to just conclude with a little incident that happened a couple years ago in a hospital in Riga, Latvia. This was the previous Rabbi. The Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak was in the hospital in Riga. And they had to every day administrate a shot. The doctors had to give him a shot in order to slow down his multiple sclerosis that he was suffering from. They had a shot that he had to get every day. And one day, when the nurse came in to administrate the shot, he said, when I watched you giving me the shot, I learned a lesson about how criticism should be done. Says, number one, I noticed before you administrate a shot, you wash your hands excessively with alcohol. You are purifying your hands in a way that is not just washing. You're very, very careful to make sure your hand is very, very clean. Then I see that you're taking alcohol and you're really washing out that space where you're going to put in that shot, where you're going to puncture my skin. You are washing that space over and over and making sure the whole area is clean, that no germs are around. And then I see you taking out a needle and you're washing that needle with alcohol and you sterilize the needle and you make sure that that needle is so clean. And then what you do is you take that needle, you puncture, you administrate whatever you have to administrate, you pull it out right away and you bandage me. That is how criticism should be administrated. First of all, make sure you yourself, your hands are completely pure and sterilized. You are clean. You are clean. There's no germ. Any part of your germs can be infectious to the person you're going to puncture the hole in them. And even for the sake of medicine, make sure your hands are sterilized. Check in with the person you are going to puncture a hole and check in with him. Is he clean? Is he ready to listen? Is he pure, or is there germs around him that can cause him to get sick? And now when you're going actually to do what you're doing, make sure that that needle is so pure, he's so innocent, he's so covered with love and cleanliness and purity. Just come in, do what you have to do, say brief, pull out right away, and then bandage, bandage, bandage. When you criticize a person in such a way, not only you didn't give him more infectious diseases, you actually made him better. You made the world a better place. May Hashem help us. We should be able to live up to all these requirements and to make each other better people, make each other better Jews. And that actually what makes us a holy people, is what makes us a holy nation.